The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the battle, but this time everything was different. Sarah Chen walked into the main chamber and took her seat at the center of the room, in the spot traditionally reserved for the most powerful species. Councillor Vextar, Ethereal Zephyr 9, and Trade Confederation leader Moxtal sat in the outer rings where lesser powers usually placed their representatives. The reversal wasn't lost on anyone. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth," announced the session moderator, his voice respectful in a way it had never been before. Sarah stood and looked around the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of worlds stared back at her. Some faces showed fear, others displayed curiosity. All of them showed respect. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Sarah began. "We are here to discuss the future of our shared galaxy." For 3 years, Sarah had sat quietly while alien leaders made decisions about humanity's fate. They had limited human expansion, controlled human trade, and treated Earth as a resource to be exploited. Now those same leaders waited for her words like students waiting for a teacher. 3 days ago, we faced an enemy that threatened every civilized world, Sarah continued. The Devourer fleet would have consumed entire star systems if left unchecked. Working together, we stopped them. Vexitar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Ambassador Chen, we must address the obvious question. Your species has been deceiving the Council for 3 years. How can we trust anything you say now?" Sarah had been expecting this question. "Councillor Vextar, let me ask you something. When Earth first made contact with the galaxy, what was your plan for humanity?" Vextar's red eyes narrowed. "We intended to integrate your species into the galactic community." "Under whose terms?" Sarah pressed. "Under terms that would ensure stability and order." "Terms that would keep humans weak and dependent," Sarah corrected. "Terms that would prevent us from developing our own military forces or expanding beyond a handful of systems. Terms that would make us perpetual clients of more powerful species." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew Sarah was right. "We studied galactic history before making contact," Sarah explained. "We learned what happened to every emerging species over the past 2,000 years. The lucky ones became junior partners with limited rights. The unlucky ones became slave worlds or were conquered outright." Zephyr 9 floated higher above her seat. "That's an unfair characterization. The Council maintains order and prevents wars." "The Council maintains control," Sarah replied firmly. "You prevent wars by making sure no one can challenge the established powers. Every new species gets the same treatment. Limited fleet sizes, restricted technology, controlled expansion." Sarah activated a holographic display that showed the galactic political structure. The core worlds controlled by the Council powers were highlighted in blue. Client species territories were shown in yellow. Restricted zones and forbidden sectors appeared in red. "Look at this map," Sarah said. "The same species that founded the Council still control the most valuable systems. Every species that joined later got pushed to the edges, limited to whatever scraps the founders didn't want." "That's how civilizations grow," Moxtal protested, his forearms gesturing frantically. "Older species naturally develop more advanced territories." "No," Sarah replied. "That's how empires work. And humanity decided we wouldn't be part of your empire." The display changed to show the real extent of human space. Instead of the handful of systems the Council thought humans controlled, the map revealed a vast network of hidden bases, secret shipyards, and advanced research facilities. "We spent 3 years building what you see now," Sarah explained. "Not because we wanted to conquer anyone, but because we refused to be conquered ourselves." Admiral Rivera's image appeared on the main screen. He was still in his command center, coordinating the human fleet that now patrolled the outer sectors. "The current situation is simple," Rivera said. "Humanity has the largest and most advanced military force in known space. We can destroy any existing fleet, defend any system, and project power across the entire galaxy." The implications hung in the air like a sword. Every council member understood that the balance of power had shifted completely. "So, what do you want?" Vextar asked quietly. Sarah had been preparing for this moment for years. "We want a new agreement, one based on equality instead of domination." She activated another display that showed her proposed changes to the galactic government structure. No more restrictions on fleet sizes based on species age or council seniority. No more mandatory limits on territorial expansion. No more technology sharing requirements that only go one direction. "You're talking about dismantling the entire system," Zephyr 9 said, her voice shaking. "I'm talking about fixing it," Sarah corrected. The current system worked when the biggest threat was wars between council members. But the Devourers proved that external threats require unity, not control. The new proposal was radical. Instead of a hierarchy based on historical power, the galaxy would be protected by a collective defense agreement. Species would contribute to common security based on their capabilities, not their political status. Trade and expansion would be regulated by economic factors, not political ones. This would mean the end of council dominance, Moxtal observed. It would mean the beginning of galactic cooperation, Sarah replied. The old system was already breaking down. The Devourers would have destroyed it completely if we hadn't intervened. Over the following hours, Sarah outlined humanity's vision for the future. Human ships would patrol trade routes and respond to threats, but they wouldn't conquer or control other species. The advanced technology humans had developed would be shared gradually, allowing other civilizations to strengthen their own defenses. But there would be conditions. Any species that attacks another member of the galactic community will face the full power of the Terran Defense Fleet, Admiral Rivera explained. We won't tolerate conquest, slavery, or genocide. And if we refuse your proposal? Vextar asked. Sarah looked directly at him. Then you're free to try maintaining the old system without human participation. But when the next crisis comes, and there will be a next crisis, you'll face it alone. The choice was clear. Accept humanity's leadership and benefit from their protection, or reject it and face an uncertain future without their most powerful military force. The debate continued for days. Some species supported the new arrangement immediately, seeing it as an opportunity for growth and expansion they had been denied for centuries. Others resisted, unwilling to give up the privileges they had enjoyed as council members. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. The new Galactic Compact was signed, exactly 1 week after the Battle of Kepler Corridor. Instead of a council dominated by ancient powers, the galaxy would be governed by a representative assembly where every species had a voice. Instead of restricted client states, all members would have the right to expand and develop according to their capabilities. And instead of relying on political balance to prevent conflicts, the galaxy would be protected by the Terran Defense Fleet. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the new assembly building, looking out at the stars. Ships from dozens of species moved through space nearby, but the largest vessels bore the blue and white colors of Earth. Admiral Rivera joined her at the observation window. Any regrets about revealing ourselves? Sarah shook her head. We couldn't hide forever, and the galaxy needed to change. The other species are still adjusting to the new reality, Rivera observed. Some of them are having trouble accepting that humans are no longer the junior partners. They'll adjust, Sarah said confidently. They don't have much choice. A communication alert chimed and Rivera checked his personal device. Interesting news from the Outer Rim. Our deep space scouts found something. More Devourers? No. Ancient ruins on a dead world near the edge of the galaxy. The archaeological team thinks they might be human in origin. Sarah turned to look at him. How old? Preliminary dating suggests 50,000 years, maybe more. Sarah felt a chill. If humans had once lived in this galaxy before developing spaceflight on Earth, it would explain many things. The ease with which they had adapted ancient alien technology, the instinctive understanding of galactic politics, the feeling that this was not humanity's first encounter with interstellar civilization. Keep me informed about the excavation, Sarah said. She turned back to the observation window and watched human ships patrol the space lanes. The galaxy was safer now than it had been in centuries. The threat of the Devourers had been eliminated, and the new governmental structure would prevent the kinds of the Crystal Throne Row conflicts that had weakened civilization for millennia. But Sarah suspected this was only the beginning. Humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy and taken on the responsibility of protecting it. They had proven that they were more than capable of handling that responsibility. The question now was what other secrets the galaxy might hold, and what other challenges humanity would face as its reluctant guardians. In the distance, a human dreadnought completed its patrol route and jumped to hyperspace, heading for the Outer Rim where ancient mysteries waited to be uncovered. Admiral Zaxthul stood on the bridge of his flagship Void Render, watching the tactical display show the approaching human system. The Zephyrian commander was old even by his species' long-lived standards, having served the Empire for over 3 centuries. He had broken dozens of rebellious worlds and shattered the fleets of countless primitive species. Contact the human leadership, he ordered his communications officer. Inform them that they have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will begin bombardment of their worlds. The response came back within minutes, transmitted on a simple radio frequency that made Zaxthul shake his head at their primitive technology. The voice belonged to a human female speaking in their crude language that the translation computers quickly converted. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are not welcome in our space. Turn around now or we will defend ourselves. Zaxthul's officers laughed at the humans' boldness. Defend themselves? With their primitive ships against the advanced technology of the Empire? It would be like insects trying to fight a dragon. How refreshingly naive, Zaxthul mused. Begin the approach. Target their largest ships first, we'll make this quick. But as the Zephyrian fleet moved deeper into the human system, their sensors began detecting something unexpected. Energy signatures were appearing from behind the large moon orbiting the third planet. Not the simple fusion signatures they had expected, but something far more complex and powerful. Sir, we're reading massive energy buildups from multiple sources, the sensor officer reported, his voice carrying the first hint of concern. 20 large vessels are moving out from behind the planetary satellite. On the tactical display, the human ships appeared one by one. Each vessel was indeed enormous, larger than anything in Zaxthul's fleet except his own flagship. But more concerning was the energy they were producing. The power signatures were off the charts for what should have been primitive fusion technology. Analysis, Zaxthul demanded. Unknown, sir. The energy patterns don't match any technology in our databases. And sir, they're launching fighters. The display showed clouds of small craft pouring out of the human supercarriers. Thousands of tiny ships formed into complex formations that moved with precision that shouldn't have been possible for a species that had just developed spaceflight. Each fighter squadron moved as if controlled by a single mind, weaving patterns that confused the Zephyrian targeting computers. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the alien fleet from her command chair aboard the Indomitable. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency that came from years of training and preparation. Every person on her ship knew exactly what they were supposed to do. All fighters launched and forming attack patterns, reported her flight controller. Enemy fleet is maintaining course and speed. They don't seem to realize what they're flying into. Weapons status? Sarah asked. All railgun batteries charged and ready. Missile tubes loaded with hunter-killers. Point defense systems. Online, Sarah nodded. The human weapons might seem primitive compared to alien energy beams and gravity weapons, but humanity had spent decades perfecting them. The railguns could fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed, and the hunter-killer missiles had AI guidance systems that could outthink most defensive measures. Open fire, she ordered. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. The Zephyrian ships fired their energy beams, expecting to punch through primitive human armor and end the battle quickly. Instead, their beams struck adaptive armor plating that absorbed and redistributed the energy, while clouds of metallic chaff confused their targeting systems. The human response was devastating. Railgun projectiles moving at incredible speed smashed into Zephyrian shields, overloading them through pure kinetic energy. The aliens had designed their defenses to stop energy weapons, not solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. Admiral Zaxthul watched in shock as 3 of his ships exploded within the first minute of combat. This wasn't supposed to happen. Primitive species were supposed to have primitive weapons that couldn't threaten advanced starships. Evasive maneuvers, he shouted. Reform the battle line. But the human fighters were already among his fleet, moving in patterns that seemed impossible. They flew in perfect coordination, each pilot somehow knowing exactly where every other fighter would be. The small human craft carried weapons that could punch through starship armor, and they attacked with a ferocity that stunned the Zephyrian crews. On the human ships, the battle was being fought by a combination of human skill and artificial intelligence that the aliens couldn't comprehend. Every human pilot was linked to advanced computer systems that calculated optimal attack patterns and shared information instantly across the entire fleet. The result was a level of coordination that no organic crew could match. Enemy flagship is turning to flee, reported Lieutenant Commander Park. Should we pursue? Sarah watched the tactical display as the surviving Zephyrian ships broke formation and began retreating. Of the 50 vessels that had entered human space with such confidence, only 12 remained functional. The others were either destroyed or drifting powerlessly in space. Let them run, Sarah decided. But make sure they take a message with them. She opened a communication channel to the fleeing alien admiral. When his face appeared on her screen, she could see the shock and fear in his reptilian features. Admiral Zaxathul, this is Admiral Chen. You came to our space to threaten our people and our worlds. We have shown you what happens to those who threaten humanity. Take this message back to your Empress. Humanity will not submit, and we will not be conquered. If you come back, we will be ready. The communication ended and Sarah turned back to her crew. The first battle was over, but she knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would return with larger fleets and better preparation. But humanity would be ready for them. In the depths of space, automated human reconnaissance drones followed the retreating Zephyrian fleet, gathering intelligence on their technology, their tactics, and their capabilities. Every piece of information would be analyzed and used to improve human defenses and weapons. Word of the battle spread through both human and alien space. On Earth and the human colonies, there was celebration and relief. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. But experienced military leaders like Sarah knew that the real war was just beginning. In the Zephyrian Empire, news of the defeat sent shockwaves through the military hierarchy. A punishment fleet had been destroyed by primitives. It was unprecedented and unthinkable. Emergency meetings were called, and fleets began mobilizing across the empire. On her crystal throne, Empress Vexandra received the report of the battle with growing rage. Her perfect record of conquest had been broken by a species that should have surrendered without firing a shot. The humans had not only fought back, they had won decisively. Impossible, she hissed, her 6 arms clenching into fists. Prepare, the war fleets. I will deal with these humans personally. The throne room of the Eternal Dominion had never seen Empress Vexandra in such a state of fury. Her 6 arms moved constantly as she paced back and forth, her crystalline crown catching the light from the holographic displays that showed the aftermath of Admiral Zaxthul's defeat. The surviving ships of the punishment fleet had limped back to Imperial space carrying news that no one wanted to deliver. 300 ships, she declared to her assembled war council. I want 300 of our best vessels, commanded by our most experienced admirals. These humans will learn what happens when someone dares to humiliate the Zephyrian Empire. General Kethmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My Empress, perhaps we should study the battle data more carefully before committing such a large force. The humans demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence did not predict. The Empress turned her glowing eyes toward her chief advisor, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Are you suggesting that I cannot defeat a species of primitives, General? Not at all, my Empress. I am merely suggesting caution. The humans destroyed 38 of our ships while losing none of their own. This indicates that we may have underestimated their capabilities. Vexandra waved away his concerns with 2 of her arms while the other 4 continued to manipulate the holographic displays. They achieved surprise through trickery and primitive cunning. When we arrive in force with proper preparation, they will fall like all the others. But even as she spoke, new reports were arriving that would soon change everything. A deep space. Monitoring stations across the Zephyrian Empire began detecting strange hyperspace signatures. Ships were moving through Imperial territory, but not along any of the established trade routes or patrol paths. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, far from any inhabited system, 200 human supercarriers moved through hyperspace using routes that shouldn't have existed. The human understanding of faster-than-light travel was different from the alien methods, based on mathematical principles that allowed them to find pathways through folded space that other species had never discovered. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room of the Indomitable, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of every human ship in the fleet. Around her, dozens of other ship captains appeared as life-sized holograms, all linked together in a command conference that spanned thousands of light years. Phase 1 of Operation Wildfire is complete, she announced to the assembled commanders. The alien empire has committed to a massive retaliation fleet. Intelligence suggests they're gathering over 300 ships for a direct assault on Earth. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Thunderbolt leaned forward in her chair. And while they're focused on building up their invasion force, we hit their supply lines and manufacturing centers. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Every ship captain has their target assignments. We strike fast, gather intelligence, and get out before they can respond. Remember, this isn't just about damaging their military capacity. We need to learn everything we can about their technology, their tactics, and their command structure. The human fleet had spent months preparing for this operation. Long-range reconnaissance missions, had mapped Zephyrian supply routes, identified key installations, and studied alien patrol patterns. Every piece of information had been analyzed and incorporated into a master battle plan that would hit the Empire where it was least prepared. Captain Marcus Torres of the Defiant raised his hand. What about civilian casualties? Some of these targets are in heavily populated systems. Sarah's expression grew serious. We are not targeting civilian populations or purely civilian installations. Our targets are military supply depots, ship construction facilities, and communication relay stations. If civilians get in the way, we abort the mission and find another target. We're fighting for humanity's survival, but we're not going to become monsters in the process. The conference continued for another hour as final details were confirmed and contingency plans reviewed. When it ended, the human fleet split into smaller task forces, each heading toward different parts of the Zephyrian Empire. The first strike came at the Kepler Industrial Complex, a massive shipbuilding facility that produced nearly 10% of the Imperial fleet. 3 human supercarriers dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their sensors immediately cataloging the defenses and ship positions. The station manager, a Zephyrian named Vorthkala, was reviewing production schedules when his security chief burst into his office. Sir, we have unknown contacts entering the system. 3 large vessels, configuration unknown. Vorthkala looked at his tactical display with confusion. No ships were scheduled to arrive for another week, and these vessels didn't match any Imperial designs. Hail them and demand identification. We're trying, sir, but they're not responding. They're launching small craft, hundreds of them. The human fighters swept through the system like a swarm of angry insects. They moved with perfect coordination, their pilots linked through quantum communication networks that allowed instant information sharing. Each fighter knew the position and status of every other unit in the attack force. The space station's defenses were designed to repel attacks from other starships, not clouds of small, fast-moving targets that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The human fighters used advanced stealth technology and electronic warfare systems that confused Zephyrian sensors and targeting computers. Within 2 hours, the Kepler Industrial Complex was a burning ruin. The humans had destroyed the ship construction, bays, the manufacturing centers, and the supply storage facilities. But they had also done something else. They had captured intact examples of Zephyrian technology, downloading computer systems and taking detailed scans of everything they could find. Similar attacks erupted across a dozen star systems. Human. Task forces hit communication relay stations that coordinated fleet movements, supply depots that fueled the Imperial war machine, and research facilities that developed new weapons. Each attack followed the same pattern: swift, precise, devastating, and followed by rapid withdrawal. The Zephyrian military command structure began to collapse under the strain of trying to respond to attacks that came from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Their ships were designed for large-scale fleet battles, not for hunting small, fast task forces that could strike anywhere at any time. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Empress Vexandra received report after report of attacks across her territory. Her perfect empire, which had maintained peace through strength for thousands of years, was suddenly under assault from an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. How is this possible? She demanded of her intelligence chief. How are primitive humans conducting coordinated attacks across half the galaxy? The intelligence chief, a nervous creature named Zilthpan, struggled to provide answers. My Empress, their technology appears to be more advanced than we initially assessed. They're using hyperspace routes that our navigation computers say don't exist. Their ships are equipped with stealth systems that make them nearly invisible to our sensors, and their coordination suggests a level of communication technology that rivals our own. Vexandra's rage grew with each word. Find me solutions, not excuses. How do we stop them? We're trying, my Empress. But they seem to know our patrol schedules, our defensive positions, even our communication frequencies. It's as if they've been studying us for years. The truth was that humanity had been studying the Zephyrian Empire for years. Every trade contact, every diplomatic exchange, every piece of alien technology that had fallen into human hands had been carefully analyzed. Human intelligence agencies had built comprehensive databases of Zephyrian military capabilities, and human scientists had spent decades developing countermeasures. But the aliens didn't know this yet. All they knew was that their perfect empire was suddenly under attack from an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered before. The humans didn't follow standard military doctrine. They didn't respect established battle lines or honor traditional rules of engagement. They fought like cornered animals with the intelligence of master strategists. As reports of more attacks flooded in, Empress Vexandra made a decision that would change the course of the war. She would not wait for the humans to come to her. She would take her personal battle fleet and hunt them down herself, crushing them with the full might of her imperial forces. It was exactly what the humans had been hoping she would do. Empress Vexandra stood on the command deck of her massive flagship Eternal Dominion, surrounded by the greatest concentration of military power the Zephyrian Empire had assembled in centuries. 200 warships formed a protective formation around her dreadnought, while another 100 vessels spread throughout the sector searching for the elusive human fleet. The past month had been a nightmare of coordinated attacks that struck at the heart of her empire's military infrastructure. Ship construction facilities lay in ruins, communication networks had been severed, and supply lines that had operated smoothly for millennia were in chaos. The humans had demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about primitive species. "Status report," she demanded of her fleet commander, Admiral Zerthval. "My Empress, our search patterns have covered 12 sectors, but we have found no trace of the human main fleet. They appear to be using hyperspace routes that our navigational systems cannot predict or follow." Vexandra's 4 eyes glowed with barely contained rage. In over 1,000 years of rule, no enemy had been able to evade her forces for more than a few days. The humans were making a mockery of her empire's technological superiority. "They cannot hide forever," she declared. "When we find them, I will personally oversee their destruction." Unknown to the Empress, the human fleet was much closer than she realized. 50 human supercarriers hung in the void just outside the EO detection range of Zephyrian sensors, their stealth systems making them invisible to enemy scans. The humans had been watching the alien search patterns for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the tactical displays from her command chair aboard the Indomitable. The alien fleet was spread out in a search formation that left their command ship relatively isolated. It was exactly the opportunity she had been waiting for. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the encrypted command frequency. "We have positive identification of the enemy command vessel. The target is the largest dreadnought in the center of their formation. Remember, our goal is not just to win this battle, but to capture intact alien technology and intelligence data. Captain." Elena Rodriguez appeared as a hologram beside Sarah's chair. "Admiral, intelligence reports suggest that ship is carrying the alien Empress herself. If we can capture her, we might be able to end this war quickly." Sarah nodded grimly. "That's the plan. But remember, these aliens have been conquering other species for thousands of years. They won't go down easily, and they won't surrender just because we ask nicely." The human attack began with a coordinated strike that seemed to come from every direction at once. Stealth fields dropped, revealing human supercarriers that had somehow positioned themselves throughout the Zephyrian formation without being detected. Thousands of fighters poured out of the carriers, their pilots linked through quantum communication systems that allowed for perfect coordination. But this battle was different from the previous engagements. The Zephyrian forces were prepared for human tactics this time, and they had brought their most advanced weapons and their most experienced crews. The space around the Eternal Dominion erupted into a maelstrom of energy beams, kinetic projectiles and explosions that lit up the darkness like a newborn star. Admiral Zerthval coordinated the Imperial defense with centuries of experience behind his commands. "Deploy gravity mines around the command ship. Focus all energy weapons on their largest vessels. Launch all fighters and establish a defensive perimeter." The Zephyrian fighters were different from anything the humans had encountered before. These were elite pilots flying advanced craft equipped with exotic weapons that could bend space-time itself. They moved in formations that created gravitational distortions, making it nearly impossible for human weapons to lock onto them. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Lieutenant Commander Park called out target information as fast as his computers could process it. "Enemy fighters are using some kind of spatial warping technology. Our targeting systems are having trouble maintaining locks." Sarah felt a moment of concern. The humans had won their previous battles through technological superiority disguised as primitive tactics, but now they were facing an enemy that was bringing their best technology to bear. This would be a real test of human capabilities. "Activate Hunter-Killer Protocol," she ordered. "Launch boarding pods at the enemy command ship." The Hunter-Killer missiles were humanity's answer to advanced alien defenses. Each missile contained an artificial intelligence, that could adapt to enemy countermeasures in real time, learning and evolving its attack patterns faster than any organic pilot could respond. They streaked through the battle zone like living things, dodging energy beams and gravity wells as they sought out their targets. But even more terrifying to the Zephyrians were the boarding pods. These armored capsules carried squads of human, Marines in powered armor, soldiers who had been trained to fight in zero gravity, hostile atmospheres, and confined spaces. The pods used breakthrough technology to phase through energy shields, appearing inside enemy ships like ghosts. Empress Vexandra felt the first impact as a boarding pod punched through the hull of her flagship. Alarm klaxons echoed through the corridors as security teams rushed to repel the invaders. But the humans who emerged from the pod were unlike anything the Imperial Guards had ever faced. The human Marines wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any organic creature. Their weapons fired projectiles that could punch through the heaviest alien armor, and their helmet displays gave them tactical information that allowed perfect coordination with their teammates. But most terrifying of all was their absolute refusal to retreat or surrender, even when facing impossible odds. Commander Lisa Park of the Human Marine Corps led the assault team through the corridors of the alien flagship. Her armor's sensors painted a detailed map of the ship's layout, while her communication systems kept her in constant contact with her team and the fleet command. "Target is 3 levels up and 2 sections forward," she reported to her squad. "Intelligence suggests heavy resistance around the command areas. Stay sharp and watch for alien tech we haven't seen before." The Zephyrian defenders fought with the desperation of troops protecting their supreme leader. But they were unprepared for enemies who treated their advanced weapons as just another obstacle to overcome. Human Marines moved through the ship, like a force of nature, adapting to alien technology and tactics faster than the defenders could react. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Empress Vexandra watched her perfect fleet being systematically destroyed by human forces that fought, with a combination of advanced technology and savage determination. Her ships were more advanced, her crews more experienced, but the humans seemed to learn and adapt to every tactic her forces employed. "My Empress," Admiral Zerthval reported with growing panic in his voice. "We're losing ships faster than we can coordinate our defenses. The humans are using weapons and tactics that violate several known laws of physics." Vexandra studied the tactical display with growing horror. The human ships were deploying gravity bombs that crushed her vessels from the inside out. Swarms of nanites were converting alien hull material into more weapons, and somehow human boarding parties had penetrated her flagship's defenses and were fighting their way toward the bridge. "This is impossible," she whispered. "They are primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours." But even as she spoke, explosions echoed through the ship as human Marines blasted through the final defensive positions. The door to the bridge buckled and then exploded inward, revealing armored figures that moved within human precision and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Commander Lisa Park stepped through the smoke and debris, her weapon trained on the alien Empress. Through her armor's external speakers, she spoke in the Zephyrian language that human linguists had decoded from captured communications. "Empress Vexandra of the Zephyrian Empire, I am Commander Park of the Human Colonial Marines. You are under arrest for war crimes against humanity. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." For the first time in over 1,000 years of absolute rule, Empress Vexandra faced an enemy she could not defeat through superior firepower or technological advantage. The humans had not just matched her empire's capabilities, they had exceeded them. And now they stood on her own bridge demanding her surrender. The age of Zephyrian dominance was ending, and a new power was rising among the stars. The crystal throne room that had once symbolized absolute power now served as a prison for the former ruler of the galaxy's largest empire. Empress Vexandra sat in restraints designed by human engineers, her 6 arms bound by energy fields that adapted to any attempt at escape. Around her, the Eternal Dominion had been transformed into a mobile command center for the human fleet. Admiral Sarah Chen entered the chamber with a data tablet containing the latest intelligence reports. The Kioi capture of the Zephyrian flagship had yielded more information about the alien empire than humanity had gathered in decades of covert observation. Ship designs, military protocols, star charts, and most importantly, the locations of every major Imperial installation. "Your empire is in chaos," Sarah informed the captive Empress. "Without your central command structure, your regional governors are fighting each other instead of organizing resistance against us. 3 sectors have already declared independence and more are following every day." Vexandra raised her head, her 4 eyes still burning with defiant anger despite her circumstances. "You may have captured me through trickery and primitive Cunning, but you cannot hold an empire of 10,000 worlds. My fleets will hunt you down and destroy you. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of Zephyrian space. Red markers indicated human-controlled systems, while yellow markers showed areas where local governors had declared independence from imperial rule. Only a small fraction of the map still showed the blue markers of loyal imperial territory. What? Fleets? Sarah asked calmly. Our raids destroyed most of your ship construction facilities. Your communication networks are in ruins. Your supply lines have been cut, and your remaining admirals are too busy fighting each other for control to organize any meaningful resistance. The truth was even worse than Sarah suggested. The human strategy had been more comprehensive than anyone had realized. While the visible attacks had targeted military installations, covert operations had been spreading throughout Zephyrian space for months. Human intelligence agents, many of them members of species previously conquered by the Empire, had been sabotaging computer systems, spreading propaganda, and organizing resistance movements. But the most devastating aspect of the human campaign was psychological. The Zephyrian Empire had maintained control through the belief that their technology was superior and their military was invincible. When human forces had shattered that illusion, the entire foundation of imperial authority had crumbled with it. Captain Elena Rodriguez entered the throne room carrying a communication device. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 6 more sector governors. They're offering to provide intelligence on remaining imperial forces in exchange for autonomous rule under human oversight. Sarah nodded. The human plan had never been to occupy and directly rule the vast Zephyrian territory. Humanity lacked the resources and personnel to govern 10,000 worlds. Instead, they were offering a new kind of relationship based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. What are your terms? Vexandra demanded, finally accepting that her situation was hopeless. Simple, Sarah replied. Complete dismantlement of your military forces. All weapons of mass destruction turned over to human oversight. Reparations, paid to species that were enslaved by your empire. And most importantly, you personally will stand trial for war crimes committed during your 1,000-year reign. The former empress laughed bitterly. And if I refuse? Sarah's expression remained calm, but there was steel in her voice. Then we continue dismantling your empire piece by piece until there's nothing left. We've already demonstrated that we can defeat your forces anywhere we choose to fight. The only question is whether this ends with negotiation, or with the complete destruction of everything you built. In the months that followed, the transformation of Zephyrian space accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. Human administrators worked with local governments to establish new trade relationships, technological exchanges, and mutual defense agreements. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were given the resources and support needed to rebuild their civilizations. The 200 human supercarriers that had started the war became the foundation of a new kind of galactic government. Instead of ruling through fear and superior firepower, humanity offered partnership and mutual benefit. Worlds that joined the Human Colonial Federation gained access to advanced technology, protection from external threats, and representation in the Galactic Council that replaced the Imperial throne. But not everyone accepted the new order peacefully. In the outer regions of former imperial space, several admirals and governors attempted to maintain independent fleets and continue the old ways of conquest and exploitation. These holdouts found themselves facing human task forces that had learned everything there was to know about Zephyrian technology and tactics. The Battle of Rigel 7 became the final engagement of what historians would later call the Zephyrian War. Admiral Korthax, commanding the last organized imperial fleet, made his stand in a heavily fortified system that had served as a regional military headquarters for over 500 years. He faced 20 human supercarriers commanded by Captain Marcus Torres, who had been promoted after his performance in earlier battles. The alien admiral was confident that his defensive positions and knowledge of human tactics would allow him to achieve the victory that had eluded every other imperial commander. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. Human forces used new weapons developed from captured Zephyrian technology, combined with tactical innovations that turned the aliens' own strengths against them. When the last Imperial ship surrendered, the age of Zephyrian military dominance was finally over. On Earth, celebrations filled the streets as news of the final victory spread throughout human space. But in the halls of government and military command, leaders were already planning for the challenges that lay ahead. Humanity had won a war and inherited an empire, but ruling the galaxy would prove to be more complex than conquering it. The trial of Empress Vexandra became a symbol of the new order. Conducted on a neutral world with representatives from dozens of species serving as judges, the proceedings were broadcast throughout the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, a supreme ruler was being held accountable for the crimes committed in their name. The evidence presented during the trial painted a picture of systematic oppression, genocide, and exploitation that had continued for millennia. Entire species had been enslaved, their worlds strip-mined, their cultures destroyed. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on the suffering of countless billions of sentient beings. Vexandra showed no remorse during the proceedings, maintaining that she had acted within her rights as a galactic sovereign. But when the final verdict was delivered, even she seemed shocked by the magnitude of the crimes documented by the court. The sentence was unprecedented in galactic history. Life imprisonment on a remote world, with her psychic powers permanently suppressed to prevent any possibility of escape or influence over others. She would live out her remaining centuries as an ordinary mortal, stripped of the technological enhancements that had made her nearly immortal. As the former Empress was led away to begin her sentence, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the assembled representatives of the new Galactic Federation. The organization that had replaced the Zephyrian Empire was still fragile and untested, but it represented something that had never existed before, a truly voluntary union of worlds based on mutual respect and shared benefit. Today marks the end of an age of conquest and the beginning of an age of cooperation, Sarah announced to the gathering. Humanity did not fight this war to become new overlords, but to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy belongs to all of us, and together we will build something better than any empire. In the years that followed, the Human Colonial Federation would face new challenges and new threats. Other ancient powers existed beyond the former Zephyrian territory, and not all of them would welcome humanity's rise to galactic prominence. But the precedent had been set. Humanity had proven that superior technology and overwhelming firepower were not enough to guarantee victory against enemies who refused to accept defeat. The 200 supercarriers that had begun as desperate defensive measures became the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization. They served not as conquerors but as protectors, ensuring that the freedom humanity had fought to preserve would be extended to every world that chose to join them among the stars. The age of human dominance in the galaxy had begun, but it would be dominance through strength, wisdom, and the unshakable belief that every sentient species deserved the right to determine its own destiny.